So this is what we're dealing with over here. Does anybody else's pile of 25 books look this big? That's what I want to know. Anyway, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the 25 books that I am most looking forward to reading in 2025. I'm going to share with you one book for almost every letter in the alphabet. If I don't know a lot about the book, I will just explain to you why I'm still looking forward to reading it. All right, let's go ahead and get started because I've got quite a few books to go through. Starting with the letter A, I have And Quiet Flows the Dawn. This is by Mikhail Sholokov. It is a classic of Russian literature and covers the epic of Cossack life during the revolution. So I became interested in reading this book because I love Tolstoy. I really enjoyed the book War and Peace, and I haven't heard that if you like War and Peace, but you want to hear more about the Cossacks, which get mentioned in War and Peace, then this is the book for you. I have not read anything by Sholokov, but I am really looking forward to getting to this year, I hope. This book seems very thick, but is surprisingly under 600 pages. So I don't know what's going on there, but yeah, that's book number 1. For the letter B, I have Black Empire by George Schuyler, which is about Dr. Henry Belsidus, a Black scientific genius who masterminds a worldwide conspiracy to take back the African continent from imperial powers, punish Europe and America for white supremacy and their crimes against the planet's Black population. Sounds like so much is going to happen in this rather short book. I really hope I get to this year, probably in February. For letter C, I have Clarissa. This is a book that I am reading as part of my year-long read. It is definitely the longest book that I have planned for this year. It is 499 pages. Really? You couldn't have just made it 1,500 for kicks and giggles? I don't know. This will actually be a reread for me. I read this in high school and then read an abridged version of it in college because they weren't that mean in college. I read it for fun in high school. Go figure. Anyway, this is the original epistolary novel. The entire thing is written in letters, and I'm really looking forward to rereading and annotating this one this year. And I've planned to spread it out over the course of the whole year, so even though it's incredibly long, it hopefully won't feel like it is. It will probably feel like it is. I zoomed you in just a little bit so you couldn't cheat by trying to look ahead. For the letter D, I have the classic Don Quixote. I have not reread Don Quixote, I think ever. I read it quite a while ago, maybe also in high school. I've liked really large books for a very long time, guys, if you haven't figured that out yet. And I'm really looking forward to getting back into this book. I have seen the musical The Man of La Mancha and also really enjoyed that. I recall this book being very funny and a great satire, but I'm really hoping as like a full-grown adult that I will get even more out of this book than I did before. Next, I have a work of historical fiction, this great big chunky book, The Eighth Life. And apparently these will be the only books I read this year because like how many pages do I think I'm getting through in this year? I'm feeling ambitious. That's what's going on. And yeah, The Eighth Life. This is a book that takes place in Hungary, Georgia. It takes place in Georgia. I recall that. And it is about a family that has a history of making chocolate. Like, what doesn't sound good about reading about that? It is a super ridiculously long book, but the few people who have commented saying that they've read it said it's a really good book and worth it. So I am definitely hoping to get to this. It sounds like historical fiction, but it's set in like Eastern Europe and a chocolate making family. I think they compared it to other Russian classics that I liked. It just sounds like all the things that I would like on maybe a good cold winter date. Now I want hot chocolate. For the letter F, I came back to my senses and realized I should probably put some short books on this list, so I threw in Fathers and Sons. Or Fathers and Children. This is also known as Fathers and Sons, and this is by Ivan Turgenev. This edition is translated by Nicholas Pasternak Slater and Maya Slater. Ooh, a couple maybe? And is put out by New York Review Books. I have another edition of it that I think is a signet classic, and that one is called Fathers and Sons. So we'll see which one I end up deciding to read this year, but either way, I have heard it's a very good short book. Covers basically discussions that happen between a father and his son when his son comes home from college with some very different ideas. A classic, yes, but I feel like very relatable to most parents. For the letter G, I have Green Henry. I feel like this book gets the green light for having all my favorite buzzwords: romance, artist as the protagonist, Bildungsroman. Apparently, I think this is like one of the original Bildungsromans. I don't know if that's true, but I'm looking forward to it. This book just sounds like it's going to have everything I could possibly want in it, and it's also a fat, chunky book, so yay! For H, I'd really like to read Havisham, and this is by Ronald Frame. This is, yes, inspired by Charles Dickens' Great Expectation. Now, you would think I would have put Great Expectation as my G, but I didn't. Am I looking forward to reading that book? Maybe. I'm not decided. Therefore, I gave it to somebody else. Anyway, I will read Great Expectations before reading this, and if you haven't read Great Expectations before, Mrs. Havisham is a major character in that book, and let's just say this cover has something to do with her and her outfit. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this book goes. As far as I know, it's a retelling or reimagining from Mrs. Havisham's perspective. For I'm going to be going with Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This talks a lot about what it is like to be an African-American man in the US, and follows this one particular guy's journey, I think from the South to New York. And I have heard that this book is just very dense in terms of themes and topics, and I'm here for it. I read a lot of books by Thomas Hardy in 2023, and I think none in 2024. So in 2025, I want to go back to reading some of his works, and I will hopefully be getting to Jude the Obscure. I have heard that this is his saddest, most depressing works, and I think I'm finally ready for it. You kind of have to be ready for Hardy because he's just going to make you feel sad and bad over and over and over again. For the letter K, I have the Karamazov brothers. I really want to read Dostoevsky this year. I think I have just read 2 or 1 of his shorter works. I have never read the Karamazov brothers. I know a couple of different works by him and own quite a few works by him, but this is where I think I want to start. I also own a couple editions of this in different translations. This particular translation is by Ignat Avzi, and it is an Oxford World Classics edition, which is not my favorite editions of classics to read, but I did like this translation the best. For L, I have this beautiful edition of Lodore by Mary Shelley. This is a work by Mary Shelley that I am not familiar with and that apparently isn't frequently in print. However, this publisher, Rediscovered Classics, I think is doing a fabulous job of republishing some lesser-known classics by well-known authors with beautiful sort of contemporary feeling covers, which I completely appreciate because sometimes people are interested in classics just because they look like this. Some of us love that. Some people don't. Some people want to read pretty books and like flowery books. And this one, if you can't tell, has both flowers and guns on it. Like, way to go, Mary Shelley. How's that all working together? I don't know, but I want to find out this year. For the letter M, I would like to read March by Geraldine Brooks. This is the winner of the Pulitzer Prize. I picked up this in 2023 when I first started my channel, read the first chapter or section and wanted to keep going and didn't, and then somehow never got back to this book. I really want to get to it in 2025. It tells the story from a different perspective of Little Women, namely the perspective of the father. I have heard that you don't need to have read Little Women in order to read this book. I have read Little Women, I think, twice. I have no intention of rereading it this year, but I do plan to get to this book. Okay, I made a little bit of space for myself. For the letter N, I would like to read Native Son by Richard Wright. This is another work by an African-American author. It covers the story of what happens to a young man when he ends up accidentally murdering someone, and I believe we follow him through the time of the incident and during the trial, and it covers the justice and injustice system, if you will, in the US. So it'll be very interesting to get into this book again, maybe in February, but I feel like you can read books by African-American authors year-round, and I intend to do so. For the letter O, I have The Ordeal of Richard Feverel, and yes, this is on my January TBR, but I actually made this list before I made that TBR, so it's just a happy coincidence. Or as Bob would say, a happy little accident. Anyway, this is by George Meredith. I became interested in this book a while ago, I think initially because it was on the 1899 best books of the century or in the last century or something like that list. I did a video on it. You can watch that if you want. And I became interested after seeing it on that list. I've also heard a lot about George Meredith and wanted to read the book because of that. And then last summer, I read Howard's End by M. Forster, and this book was mentioned in that book, and now I really, 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 really want to read it, thus it's on this list. Another book that is also on my January TBR and is a year-long read for me is The Pillow Book, and this is my book for P. And this is a collection of, I guess, beautiful sayings, expressions, thoughts that Shonoagon had. She was a Japanese court woman during 10th century Japan, I believe. Wrote at the same time as the author of The Tale of Genji, and in fact, they were rivals in writing, apparently, maybe rivals in the court in general, and I'm interested to read and hear about that time period from a different perspective. And I think the other reason I'm interested in this book is one of my favorite things in The Tale of Genji is the descriptions of beauty and just this entire concept of beauty and all the beautiful things in nature and life that they focus on. Apparently that's primarily what this nonfiction work is about, and I'm here for it. For Q, I have the curious book titled Q. Like, what are the chances? And this takes place in 16th century Europe. It follows the wars of religion following the Reformation. It has an Anabaptist as well as I think a Catholic in here. And they are basically following each other around the world in some sort of mysterious chase that might end up being fatal to one of them. I don't know, sounds fascinating. Can't wait to read it. For R, I have A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. Like I mentioned, I read Howard's End last year and really loved it. And I'm just now realizing I accidentally left Howard's End off my best books of the year. Ooh, editing me is going to have to put that in there. Anyway, I can't wait to read another E.M. Forster, and this is the one that I've had the most people say you should read this book if you liked Howard's End, because I think this book is better. Some people said you should read this book because if you liked Howard's End, which I think is better, you'll probably also like this book, which is equally good. Either way, a lot of people seem to like this book. For the letter S, I have The Sorrows of Young Werther. This was on my list last year, and I never got to it, and I still want to, so I'm putting it back on the list for this year. It's a short book. I just need to sit down and read it at some point. For the letter T, I have this interesting fantasy novel, Titus Groan. I do not know a lot about this book, other than that I know it's the first book in a series. I don't tend to read series, but I've heard really good things about this book. And then one of my viewers earlier this year read this book, and then she was mentioning how much she loved this book, and I was like, okay, that's it. It's going on the 25 and 25 list because now I doubly need to read it. Yeah. I think it's supposed to have gothic vibes. I think that might have been what interested me in it, was like a fantasy novel with gothic vibes, all the things. For the letter U, I have another little book, and that is Under the Greenwood Tree, another book by Thomas Hardy that I am trying to get to. I do want to read all of his works if possible, and so I figured as well as putting a longer one on, maybe I should get a shorter one on as well. For the letter V, I threw on Vanity Fair. I think this was also on last year's list. I really don't remember. I know I definitely wanted to get to it last year, and I think I maybe even had the chance to do so, but that every time it came up, I just had one too many long books on my list. This is a chunky book, but most people seem to really enjoy it in the characterization and his writing style, so yeah, hopefully I'll work it in. I've decided that for the letter W this year, I'm going to go with Wives and Daughters. And yes, I found the coveted Barnes & Noble's Classic Edition, which I just loved. Like, the color is nice, the dresses are nice, the painting is beautiful. Barnes & Noble's like, keep putting these books out. This is not sponsored by them, but oh my gosh, if they did. Anyway, Wives and Daughters, Elizabeth Gaskell. I read North and South, and not a big fan. Heard Wives and Daughters is very different. I did like her writing style, and I'm looking forward to this. I also listened to a piece of music earlier this year that another YouTuber put out that was of the young lady playing the piano or harpsichord or whatever she would have been playing, and loved that piece. So now I really want to read it so that I can get to that scene where she's playing the piano and put that music on in the background while I read it and just have a completely immersive experience. For the letter X, I am going with the choice that I mentioned last year but didn't own, but then bought in 2023, started to read and never finished, and that would be XX. This is a science fiction about maybe first encounters. They're not really sure. There are a lot of really bizarre things that happen in this book. I made it to maybe, just about here in the book, but I was reading it in the midst of other things and just wanted to finish books. This was one that I didn't get to finishing, but I really want to finish this year. It was so strange. It's also, I think it's called mixed media, where you have a lot of different format, some writing styles, some fonts, some other odd things going on in this book, as if the storyline itself was not odd enough. There are two different perspectives kind of that you're following. One of them I was already starting to get invested in and enjoy, and the other one I just wasn't sure how I felt about. So we'll see how it is when I get back to this. It's not going to be a priority right off the top, but I do want to finish it. And I guess I should get back to it before I feel like I need to reread the beginning. For the letter Y, I have Year of Wonders. Again, another book off my January TBR, but I promise this was the letter Y book that I wanted to choose for this list. I have been wanting to read this book for a while. It is subtitled A Novel of the Plague. For some reason, I kind of enjoy books that are about the plague. I don't know why. But this is another one, and I want to read it this year. I have heard that it is very heartwarming, yet terribly sad all at the same time. It's the plague. It makes sense. So I'm looking forward to reading this year. That's it. Those are my 25 books. Of course, there's no letter Z because that would take me to 26, and I'm not going to do that this year. I do have some books whose title starts with the letter Z, but they're also not books that I'm feeling like, yes, definitely have to read this year. So I figured I'd just stop at 25, stop while I'm ahead. There we go. Next year, I will do 26, and it will include the letter Z. So there we go. Maybe I should read those letter Zs right now, or at least this year, so I don't have to worry about those. Anyway, let me know if you have any books that you're anticipating reading this year. Let me know if we have any of the same ones in common, and maybe we can buddy read them. All right, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.